Play. Hello everyone, we're back.
Yeah.
Ramon is with me again. He's come out the doghouse. So a short leash, mind you, short leash.
I promise to behave today.
Hopefully, we'll keep each other in check. We are doing this video in fairly close succession to the last one we did, which is quite exciting. We are awash with some fabulous guitars today. We are with our good friend Bob. You can probably see from behind us we've got all kinds of stuff on the walls. We've got bazookas and balalaikas and banduriers and guitars galore, and this is a proper recording studio, full mixing facilities, everything. So quite a nice luxury environment today, and some cracking guitars. I think we should go straight on with what we've got.
Could we first just tell our beautiful audience what amplifiers we're playing through?
Why not? Start at your side.
So I'm playing a reissue, which is very rare. Only 100 of these were made.
No, I'm playing that.
Oh, are you?
Yeah. You're playing the middle one.
Okay. Do you
crossed
want
over.
do you want to start first?
Yeah, well, okay. This is a reissue of the Watkins Dominator, which dominated the market back in the 60s. The whole band, I don't know, can you see it from
We'll do a close-up.
We'll do a close-up. Great little amp, I think 20 watts, and the whole band used to go through it. And it's got the most fantastic tremolo feature on it. It sounds really good. Anyway, they were really popular. Always done in two-tone colours, using the same plastic cloth that they used to put on the Danset record players, if anybody could remember that. And I always wanted one, and then I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, I heard about a reissue, and Charlie Watkins was still alive. He was in his late 90s, and he'd commissioned somebody to make 100 of these, and they'd opened up the old tooling machines to make the right bits, and the speakers were reconed and the old way and all the rest of it. And he signed a certificate about every one. Anyway, this is one of them, and it's just got this just great. Anyway, that's that.
Right, and something Bob and I, this is Bob and this is Bob.
Yeah, I'm
Two Bobs.
Yeah.
And I'm playing through a beautiful Selmer treble and bass amp. It's a 50 watt EL-34 amp, and actually my first amp that I ever bought was a treble and bass 100 watt, so it had the full EL-34s. But also I find out that it's your first amp,
my first amp,
so
yeah,
we
yeah.
share. And it's just got a beautiful, it's very sparkly. Very sparkly tone. It's just beautiful, and obviously, you can turn it into beautiful distortion, which we won't do now. But it's just a beautiful amplifier. And this is a Mark III treble and bass. They say that the Mark II are the best ones for breaking up, for overdrive, and the snakeskin Mark I is more of a clean. It looked the best, but it was more of a clean amp. But this one here, we opened it up today, and it sounded absolutely gorgeous. So
Okay.
you know, and Bob, what you're playing through.
So I'm playing through an amp that I know nothing about at all, but I think the other Bob is going to tell us more about it. It's a Bird. What I do know is it's got a 15-inch speaker, it weighs a ton, it's quite good looking, again we'll post a close-up. But what am I not saying about this amp? What's the story?
I don't know an awful lot about it. It was given to me not so long ago by a bloke whose wife said it was either him or the Bird amp in the house. So he gave this to me, and then she probably left him, but that was my good fortune, I suppose. They were made around the same time, in the 60s, as the Watkins amps, but clearly they didn't sell so well, and they stopped making them in the 70s.
All valves.
All valve. It's got two, I don't know whether there's anything wrong with it, but this one has just got two tones. One is kind of sting your head off treble, and the other one is arguably the best crunch sound that you've ever heard. So that's why we've got it here. Neither
of which I'm probably going to demonstrate today for reasons of volume, because we're still recording, even we may be in a recording studio, but all the recording gear in the studio is actually tied up, so we're still recording on phones and a camera for this, but hopefully it'll work out. Now, let's talk about the candy that we're holding. Again, why don't we go from my left, Ramon, you across. Tell us what you've got there.
So, well, this is probably my holy grail guitar. Unfortunately, it belongs to Bob, not me, but this is the 1956, this is a real 1956 Les Paul Custom. It's a beautiful black colour, which is kind of going green, actually. And it's just got the Alnico 2, the famous Alnico 2 pickup. Although, I think when Les Paul originally played his, he actually had a Dynasonic, the Almond, with a P90 cover on it, so it looked like a P90, but it was actually a Dynasonic. But this has got that beautiful, you know, jazz. You know, it's just that really beautiful neck pickup, and you've got the P90 in the bridge, and it's not too. I'd say it's about £9. Would you say, Bob? You know,
it's not too heavy,
and it's got the super low action with the frets.
The fretless wonder.
The fretless wonder, which makes it very difficult to actually to bend. You have to, you know.
But that was what it was sold for. It was a jazz guitar. It was the top of the range. It was the most expensive one. It's got all this gold stuff on it.
Yeah.
And
multiple binding.
Triple, quadruple binding. And it was a jazz instrument. It's all mahogany. There's no maple cap, which of course is what made the standard sound more rock and roll and made it more popular. So this isn't quite so popular, and hence not so expensive as a Les Paul standard of the same kind of era, because you can't. It's not really a lead guitar instrument. It's a jazz instrument, but it's a great rhythm guitar for rock and roll as well. It's got some great sounds in it, but it's not really designed for the bending. It'd be such a shame to take the original frets out. So of course I haven't.
And although quite a lot of people do these days. I mean, partly because even those old frets, they've worn and aged as well, and sometimes it just becomes necessary. And if you do refret one of those, most people refret them with a thicker gauge.
But it's just got that, you know, even for rock and roll, you know, I'm not in tune, but it's just got a great, and the ebony board, and which is different from obviously the rosewood board. It's a different sort of sound, but it's a beautiful sound. You know, it's my favourite of the Les Paul.
So next layer in the sandwich, Bob. This tell us about this. This is your favourite, the most personal guitar, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a 1957 Strat. It's not all original. The body's 100% old. I've been told by somebody who knows his stuff that this is one of the 3 best Strats he's ever seen, and he's seen nearly every Strat that's come through his professional work.
So was there any difference between this is a 57, right?
Yeah.
So from a 1954 to a 1957, were there any differences?
Well, I don't think I've ever played a 54, so I couldn't tell you. I mean, this was bought for me as a 40th birthday present by my wife. And
didn't they say that the neck shape was slightly different?
Yeah, it's a C, isn't it? And it's small. I quite like the small neck, and it's maple, so it's got a snap to it. It's not the original it's not the original frets. These are quite jumbo frets, and this has got Lindy Frayling pickups in it because the other ones wore out. I've still got them, but they've just got something that fits. Just a great sound. So this is the one for me.
I would say what you'd notice is a guitar that came slightly later than this would have a much more pronounced V on the back of the neck.
Yeah.
Real almost a point that kind of fits in there.
They call this boat shapers or something?
This is rounder.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, some Strats I've seen, earlier Strats, they've had slightly bigger necks. The maple from this era feels very distinct. It feels very, very hard and very solid. And I think that contributes greatly to the tone. This is quite a warm sounding Strat, which of course I personally like. Yep, so that's the Strat. I'm holding on to something that's quite similar to the one that you've seen in mine before, but this is Bob's. This is a 1960 ES-335 in Sunburst. As far as I can tell, completely unmolested. I don't think there's any stories about this guitar at all. It is as you see it. Beautiful Sunburst, pretty good condition, pretty clean, no belt rash on the back. The neck on the 59 and early 60 is slightly bigger. The neck is beginning to get a little wider and flatter. But this is not, I don't think this is that far into 1960 because this is on the way to getting wide and flat. But later ones still get really wide and flat for a while. And some people really like them because they do play very, very fast. Again, it's pretty resonant acoustically and does what it says on the tin. So that's our first three guitars we're going to look at. We've got quite a lot to get through, so we're going to keep quite a pace on here and do a quick swap over and back with you in 1 minute. So here we are back. We've now, as you can see, we've got three Telecasters in front of us. We're going to go from my side across in chronological order. I've got a 1958 Telecaster here. Unusual in Sunburst.
A
refit.
Yeah.
Right. Good. Okay. Cleared that up quick. But this feels very much part of the period. The neck is quite round, medium size. It's not huge like the early ones, but it's quite big. Feels very solid. Pretty nice guitar. Clues and tuners, standard pickups, standard three-way position switch. By this time on Telecasters, they'd got rid of the horrible dead-sounding neck pickup with the capacitor across it that made it sound like a bass. This is a regular modern tele setup, so it's tone and volume and a three-way selector switch. And that's, I mean, the great thing about teles is there's not much to say about them, except just have a look at them and have a play of them and see what you think. It's a pretty nice tele.
I like it a lot. It's I swapped it. I got it on a swap for the only guitar I ever got rid of, which was a TV yellow Les Paul Junior. Single cut.
Right.
And it was a really nice guitar, the 56.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah.
Mustard yellow, Dijon mustard colour, wasn't it?
Yeah, it faded quite a lot.
Yeah.
And it was a really nice guitar, but it was to do with the neck, and it was the only one I really couldn't. I could get both hands around it, but you know, my technique doesn't really run to that. So I prefer just one hand on the fret, really. So I got rid of that and swapped it for this.
Right. Okay. Well, interesting trade. And I mean, if you look at the value of those two respective guitars now, I'd say you're probably ahead. You're probably slightly ahead. I mean, although this is a refit, which probably diminishes its value slightly, but yeah.
Now, I think otherwise it's all really right.
Yeah. And it's really, again, it feels quite warm and quite ringy, this one. So, what have you got there?
Well, this is a 1965, so it's right on the cusp of the CBS sale.
Yeah.
Telecaster with a factory Bigsby on it. And I always fancied a guitar with a tremolo, but I didn't really, at the time, I didn't fancy these fancy guitars with three pickups. Just like too much, it just got in the way because I was basically an acoustic player. So this was my first decent guitar, and after lots of saving up and hard work and song. This was £125.
Which was the going rate for that
Yeah,
guitar at that time?
in 1972 or something like that. And I used it an awful lot for that kind of
Funky stuff?
yeah, and then later on with more with all that kind of country stuff, and I think people say that the tremolo is a mistake. It messes up the tone of a telly because you've got you don't get the through strings through the body. So obviously they go into the Bigsby. But it's interesting when people come play in the studio. This is the one that a lot of them just pick up and just play for.
And it rings okay acoustically. It's got a nice ring
Yeah,
to
yeah.
it. It does.
Yeah.
Now tell me, so in the 60s, most tellies were being made with rosewood necks. And so this is relatively unusual because this is a maple cap on a maple neck, as opposed to the more common in the 60s rosewood cap. And I think people, and it's also got the transitional Fender decal logo there. So this is quite, for the Telecaster collector types, who the completists who want kind of one example of every iteration. This is one of the slightly more difficult guitars to find, I think.
Yeah, maybe. I wouldn't want to let
You wouldn't
go.
want to let go of it anyway. So that's fine. It sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. It's interesting what you say about the strings going through the body. There's a whole rabbit hole about this. Generally speaking, the more classical Telecaster does have the strings going through the body, but again in the mid-60s, for a while, probably due to a production economy, they actually started taking the strings through the back of the ashtray tailpiece instead. And there's a whole world of people out there who've got those who actually swear by that. Mm-hmm. I think it's fair to say that it sounds different, but I think it's quite unfair to say that one sounds better or worse. Just different. So moving on to you.
Well, I've got the 1972 thinline with the full range pickups, which as you know, I love the thinline tellies because you've got that kind of acoustic sort of sound.
It's nice and bright, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a Telecustom thinline, isn't it?
It's a Telecustom thinline, and it's got the different types of the sort of second type of saddles.
Yeah, quite different to that.
Yeah.
That's just, let me get this right, 'cause I'm not quite sure about this. That's the Telecaster Deluxe had one single coil and one full range, and the Custom had two, I think.
Yes.
I hope I haven't got it the wrong way around, but
Sounds about right to me.
and they were introduced, I think, in '72. Those.
Yeah, and it's a one-piece neck with a skunk stripe, and it's quite a chunky neck with the D shape. You've got some shoulders here.
Yeah.
But it's not too. It's manageable, and you've got the bullet truss rod and the 3-screw. joint
3
here.
bolts.
3-bolt.
That's interesting because obviously most Strats around that time went onto the 3-bolt, but I'd heard that quite a lot of tellies stayed on 4. Now that might be regular tellies stayed on 4, and these ones went to 3.
Yeah, because this was seen as an improvement because you could tilt. You had a little screw which would tilt the neck.
Yeah.
Because what Fender were doing, they were putting shims in
Yeah.
to get the right action, and so this was seen as an improvement. But of course, a lot of people say that if you create a bit of an air pocket there, you're going to get less connection between the super body and the neck.
I think some people find sometimes the necks just move slightly side to side, the way they don't with the 4-bolt. But again, it's the luck of the draw. Some do, some don't.
Well, a lot of people use it as a tremolo effect, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. But this is so that's the neck. And then both together. So it's a very good tone.
It's really interesting because that it still sounds like a telly. It's bright and sharp and cutting, but it's got the fatness and body of humbucker pickups. I don't know much about these.
Well, these are Seth Lovers, aren't they?
He designed them after he left Gibson, but they sound great.
So in other words, the guy who was designing them at Gibson came over and...
Was it there was some kind of metallurgy, zircon, I can't remember the name of it, which they stopped making. They couldn't get hold of this supply of this component they needed to make the screws.
Right.
But Fender now have actually, they've got hold of this compound or whatever, and they are now making these pickups again as they were originally.
Right.
Oh, really?
You know, which, I mean, the best person to listen to for this guitar is a guy called Tab Benoit, who's a Louisiana bluesman, and he just literally plays one of these, one cable into the amp, super reverb or something, and full blast, and you'll get, it's a beautiful sounding breakup.
So a couple of points of detail, one positive, one less so for me, my taste. These pickups, they have adjustments. You can adjust the tilt of the pickups as well as the height, because they've got four adjustment screws, which I think is a great thing. I think every humbucker shaped pickup should come with at least 3 adjusting screws, because that way you can get the tilt of the damn thing right. So I think that's a real big positive. The less positive thing is I can see even from here that the finish on that neck is very thick. You can see it riding right up between the frets. And so that looks like a pretty poly neck to me.
Yeah, I think in a hot room, in a hot room, if you've got sweaty hands, it's going to be. But you know, you kind of forget. You know, when you're playing this, you forget about this. Obviously, if you see Tab Benoit, he's completely taken. You know, years of playing. He's worn the neck and maybe that could be the reason for his amazing tone.
Okay.
But you know, I think when you're playing this machine, you quickly forget that it's caked in.
Now you love tele thin lines from around about this period.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
But typically the more conventional tele configuration.
Yeah,
how do you find this? You like this?
No, I love this. I think this is a wonderful sounding. These pickups are amazing. They really are amazing. You know, they sound fantastic, especially with overdrive.
Right.
They really work well with overdrive.
Okay. All right. Bit of like high-end country zing or something.
Yeah, you know.
Or even harder.
I mean, obviously, you know, if you've got a fear of the treble, you know, but if you take that treble off, you know, with the cap. You've got a great sounding instrument.
Right.
Good. 100% love this. Yeah.
Excellent. So, ladies and gents, that's the tellies. We're going to move on because we've got wave after wave to come yet. Now, viewers, I think Ron's been very well behaved so far, so I think we need to, you know, cut him a bit of slack here and let him out on the leash. So, off you go. Come on.
Okay, so first of all, Bob,
go for it.
What year is this?
I think it's 58. Something like that.
It's in mint condition.
So I owned a Supro Sahara. So the company I think that was making these, maybe on behalf of National, was Supro.
Yeah.
Because they were all pretty much the same design, which was kind of a plastic fiberglass body.
So Reso glass.
Reso glass.
You can't get it right.
With a gasket. But if you open these up, all you'll find is just one bit of wood going this way, and I think you've got another bit of wood holding the whole thing together that way.
So pretty hollow.
Yeah, balsa wood. So it's actually pretty disappointing.
Can you take your master volume down, because we've got a bit of hum.
Oh, let me read it. Not for me.
That's me.
So,
okay, fine.
So these are very, very simple guitars, but this is in exceptional condition. It looks like a brand new guitar.
It does.
You've got probably a Brazilian rosewood, I'm guessing, little bridge here. And you've also got, what's interesting about this, you've also got a Piazza, an early Piazza.
Yeah, probably one of the first.
Bridge. So you've got an acoustic option here on here, which doesn't particularly sound very good, because I'm going to just demonstrate that now. It sounds actually awful. I mean, maybe in the right context.
It sounds like early Kings.
Yeah. So, which you probably want to use a normal pickup, which is a single coil pickup here, which actually sounds very, very good. Actually, it's got a nice, it's got a zero fret there, and it's got a very nice rosewood board. It's just very, very well done. It's very good quality. The beautiful sort of Art Deco design, the National And it feels like it's not heavily lacquered. I think this is a nitro finish, which is very thin because on my particular guitar, before I sold it, I'd worn away part of the finish just from playing it. You got 3 screws here, and I think one of these screws actually again tilts the neck, and you got these screws here just holding the 2 bits of reso glass together.
Please.
But yeah, it's just a very beautiful, iconic design, and obviously the guy from the White Stripes played the red one.
Made them famous.
Yeah, you know that, did you say this? They're called Map of America.
Oh yes, that's right.
And,
Yes,
and I spent ages trying to work out, because if you look at it like that,
yeah,
it doesn't look. I mean, it looks more like, I don't know, Iceland or something. I don't know. It's only when you turn them around this way that you get some idea that maybe it is a map of America. So that's what they call them.
That's right. Yeah,
It's in incredible condition. And dare I ask, how is the trem?
Trem is absolutely awful.
No.
Unless you're playing. Not too bad, actually.
I'll tell you what, that takes me back to Hawaii.
It does, but the thing is that the actual mechanism is just a bit of plate it's kind of
Like a spring of steel.
Yeah, it's just a bit of steel that sort of flexes rather than a spring or anything like that. So it's quite precarious, But this one seems to be behaving itself quite well, actually.
It's not one for dime bombing.
No, it's just a bit of a wobble like Bixby, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, but actually, it's quite.
That's beautiful. I think that's gorgeous. And we haven't had one of those on the show at all. We did that, and for our first one to be in that shape is just a privilege.
It's a great,
wonderful, beautiful thing. So,
what have we got here?
this one in the middle is interesting.
Yeah, it's Baldwin. It's Baldwin. Baldwin got together with Burns at some stage, and then Jim Burns, who designed and built the Shadows guitars. They didn't always use Fenders. Hank had a Fender, but that was the first one in the country.
Yeah.
Which was Cliff Richards anyway, and he thought he was buying a telly. He just happened to get the wrong one, but
I know that.
Yeah, that's what he wanted. He wanted to sound like James Burton,
right?
But he got that, and the rest is history, really. But anyway, Baldwin, I think, made organs, and Burns was making good quality English guitars at a time when there was a lot of tax payable on American guitars after the war.
Yeah.
And so if you played guitar around that time, you could buy German guitars, Hofners and things.
Yeah.
Or you had the fairly rudimentary, certainly to start with, English makers. And Burns was one who kind of got it together and made some really nice guitars. And that's another story. I'm sure somebody's got one somewhere, and this will be on this program. But I suppose he needed some more finance and got together with Baldwin, who were making, as I say, keyboards, organs.
And they wanted a slice of the booming pop.
Yeah. You can't stand up on an organ.
I mean, so Ampeg came in a bit later with basses and guitars, but they were an amp company originally.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted a slice of the booming guitar market.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just nice, isn't it?
It's very pretty.
I mean, I don't.
Nice flame maple.
Yeah, I don't really use it very much, and I just walked into a second-hand guitar shop one day, and there it was.
And what does it say on the back of the?
It says, "Don't touch."
That's a joke.
Don't even look.
That's a joke.
Don't even look at it.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff. It gives you the patent number in New Zealand if you want. But the interesting thing about it was I got it quite cheaply because it didn't have the knobs on, and obviously I wanted some, and we have this great luthier, Bill Puplett in common, and Bill's the man to go to for everything as far as I'm concerned. So I go to him and say, could you just check it out, see what it's like, and could you put some knobs on it? And he said, well, you can't get these knobs now, but I can put some plastic ones on that'd be okay. And I said, that's fine. And then he lost it, and because he had so many guitars around at the time, and he lost this guitar for 4 years. Every so often I'd say,
4 years?
Yeah, can I have my guitar back? And he'd say, well, I know it's here, but I just put it in the wrong case. So eventually he phoned me up and said, I found it. forget what case it was in. And he said, but because you've been patient, you waited for 4 years, I've happened to track down this guy in his late 80s who was the man who milled the aluminium which made the pots.
Amazing.
And when the Baldwin Burns company folded, he took the die machines with him, and he's made you a set of 4 pot covers, and that's what these are. So they're absolutely original, but made about 30, 40 years later.
Fantastic, sorry. And it's got an interesting tremolo, hasn't it? It's a bit more elaborate than the National.
Yeah, well, it's quite nice. Again, you wouldn't do anything. But it gives a wobble. That's all you want.
Do we know anything about the pickups on this? They look like single coils, slightly larger than a Strat single coil, but look single coils. They sound beautiful.
James O. Burns.
So these are
Deluxe,
Burns.
or is it design?
So they're Burns pickups.
Yeah, Burns pickup.
Because I mean, this is basically, it's a Burns Vibraslim
Yeah.
with a Baldwin pick guard and sold for the original American market.
Hang on a minute, it's got a reso tune. That's what this thing's called.
Reso tube, which is the trem.
Yeah. Yeah. So, nice. I mean, it looks great, and it's...
Over really elaborate tuners actually on this as well. Really nice, chunky, effective.
And a huge volute on the back of the neck as well.
You can have huge volute. You turn the amp up and it makes a lot of noise.
A huge volute. Even more volutes. My volute goes up to 11. One thing about guitars at this time is Gretsch's were famous for this. They were hugely over-engineered. They had the kind of heavy and interesting and often unique, knobs and trams and all the rest of it. This guitar, we talked about the knobs. They're unique probably to this guitar. You've got this reso tube trem on the back end, these big pickup surrounds. There's a lot of over-engineering in this guitar, and it gives it a real, like an expensive car from the 60s, maybe an Aston Martin or something. It gives it that kind of over-engineered, heavy, high-quality feel about it, and the finish on this guitar is beautiful as well.
Yes, it is slightly over-engineered and slightly heavy. I mean, it's not one to sling around stage or smash. I mean, it just doesn't feel like that's how it should be treated. I mean, maybe no guitars made
it was
to be
probably
like
quite, in its way, it was probably quite a deluxe model at the time.
Yeah, I think Big Jim Sullivan must have played it. Or something.
Yeah,
that kind of,
Yes.
But Richie Blackmore not.
No, and definitely not Pete Townsend.
So what have you got there, Bob?
Okay, so talking of slightly strange and over-engineered things, I've got a very peculiar thing here. It's a Mosrite. Now this is a Mosrite from either the late 60s or the early 70s.
64.
64. Earlier than I thought. Right. It's in incredible condition. I'm attached to it by a strap, so I'll just get rid of that so I can move it around a bit more. It's basically a 335-ish shape, but it's got a resonator device in it. So it sounds like a thin-bodied resonator guitar. The full. It's a single cone, but it's got a metal bridge on the top, and it's got 2 Mosrite pickups, but they look a bit like DR and Dynasonics, but they're not.
Yeah.
But they look a little bit like it. Pickup selector switch for these 2 pickups, volume and tone, and that's it. Pretty recognisable Mosrite neck, quite round, quite narrow.
It's got a volute, hasn't it?
And it's got a huge volute on it. It's a very strange guitar because you don't quite know whether it's electric or acoustic.
Well, you do know when you plug it in.
And it sounds fantastic plugged in.
Yeah, it is good. You lose a lot of the resonator.
But you still have that sort of little kind of honk to the note of a resonator, Especially kind of chords down there. It's got the reso honk to it. I bet this records beautifully.
Yeah, especially if you want to do Lola by the Kings.
Other songs are available, ladies and gentlemen. 3-belt neck, belted on. I'm not sure about the tuning machines. They look quite generic, but they're probably the ones Mosrite used at the time. You have another Mosrite. Are they similar or different? Do you remember? We'll have a look in a minute.
Yeah. 2-piece neck.
Is it a 2-piece neck? Yes, it is. You can see the seam down the middle. a very nice piece of maple, very stable. 0 fret, which was a Mosrite signature. Metal nut. Not sure what metal it is. It looks like it could be machined steel even. It's silver and it's still very bright. Tiny truss rod cover. And it's got both the Mosrite and the Dobro brand names on the headstock. Because obviously it's a composite of both. It's a pretty unusual guitar.
In fact, one thing I just noticed that all these guitars, have 0 frets.
Yeah.
So they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, how interesting.
Yeah.
As a matter of interest, just an aside, the amount of time I spend on getting the height of the nut slots on my guitars right with nut files, and of course remember, if you overdo it, you've screwed it up. You've got to replace the nut, or at least fill it with filler, because otherwise the string buzzes like a sitar. But all the Gibsons and the Fenders, they don't have these 0 frets. If you have a 0 fret on the guitar, it takes away all this problem immediately. The action on the first fret is as good as the action on the second and third and fourth. And I think a 0 fret on a guitar is a really, really good idea from a playable point of view.
I agree, yeah.
Especially if you have your nut slot cut too high, particularly when you're playing the third string, plain third string, and you're playing the major note and an E chord, right? I'm pushing it. It's so easy without much finger pressure to bend that note out of tune. It always sounds a bit sick. And you know, with 0 frets, it almost gets rid of that extra pressure. Just as an aside, I think 0 frets,
Great.
big design.
One quick aside that I don't think it's been mentioned, that this is a Mosrite guitar. That was a company owned by a bloke called Semi Mosley. And you'll notice that, so it's his name there, which is the Mosrite brand, but it's also got Dobro on the top as well. So obviously there was some kind of joint venture between him and the Doppiera brothers to supply the resonator that went into it.
And this guitar, surprisingly, this guitar really...
It's got a bit of that resonator vibe to it.
And it sustains.
Yeah.
It rings. You know, I'd expected this guitar to be one of the nice and honky, but the note dies. No.
Yeah.
It's also good for Romeo and Juliet.
Indeed.
It's easy to play with the National.
Indeed. I can't play that piece. I can never get
It's difficult.
the fingering right. It's tough, isn't
I
it?
had to do it as a wedding dance song once.
It's tough.
A bit of a strain now.
So is it in open tuning or standard tuning?
Open D.
Yeah.
Open D. Original
Yeah.
is an open D.
That might make it easier. Okay, you can show us that in a bit. As I let you out of the doghouse. Yes, you can. That's your exit fee.
Okay, let's change these up.
Let's
then.
move on.
Yeah.
Right, we're back. I just thought one little interjection. If any of you have got older guitars out there, just one little tip. Maybe you've heard this before, maybe you haven't. Very often you find that the controls on old guitars get a bit crackly. This one's really, really clean as it happens, but controls get crackly. That's because dirt accumulates on the carbon tracks of the potentiometers inside the guitar. And it's worse on old guitars, and it's not really great to have to replace old guitar parts, or you can take the things apart, the specialists can clean them, and it never quite works. There's a really good way around it, because mostly you can actually clean pots by simply wiggling them open and close and just clean them for a bit. You can use a little tiny drop of contact cleaner if you like, although some people don't like it because it accumulates garbage. Anyway, there is a way around this, especially if you've got quite a lot of guitars and they're old guitars. Every time you put your guitars away, be disciplined and turn the guitars to 0. And what that means is that the wiper blade on the inside of all the controls is resting at the bottom end of the potentiometer where you hardly ever use it. So any damage and any grut that accumulates, all the crackle will accumulate at the bottom end of the knob, which is where you're not using it. And it will keep all the top ends of your knobs really nice and clean.
Nice, I didn't know that.
Really
Yeah.
so little collector vintage tip for you.
Thank you very much, that.
There.
Oh, very good,
Thank
very
you.
nice.
There you are.
Thank you very, very much.
So now that you're at the doghouse, you're going to lead us into a rousing chorus of...
a song which my dear mother loves. Here we go. Well, if I start off here, I'm going to need your help, Bob, on this one. But
Yep.
this model is
6120
and it's a beautiful guitar. It's got
pickups.
Filtertrons.
Filtertron pickups. It's got lots.
Two,
It's,
sir.
it's got 376 knobs and dials,
Counting.
which all do lots of interesting things. And what's really nice, this is my one sort of criticism about the modern Japanese remakes, which are very good. They're excellent, and Bob loves them. But the actual finish on these older Gretches is so thin, and it just seems more kind of resonant. I'm just sure that I don't know if the Japanese reissues would resonate as much, guys. I don't know what you think, but
I doubt it. It's really thin
yeah,
and brittle.
it's really thin.
Very big F holes on that.
Yes.
Like, that's a 56.
Six.
Right. Yeah.
But it's actually,
612, yeah.
a lot of people say that the Gretsch workmanship is not as good as Gibson's and so forth, but this is very intricate.
Well,
That's
it was
good.
designed specifically so you could get your plectrum out easily
Right.
when it falls inside.
Which is a bit of a big issue, really, isn't it?
It is. Especially when you've got all the wiring that they've got in there. Actually, what happened on this one was it was far too complicated because you pressed something and it just turned itself off mid.
Actually, you know these things are 56. It's got to be a very late 56 because you've got the thumbnail markings on the side of the neck. That's 57. You've got filtertrons which weren't introduced until that 57. So
All right, so 56.
it might be 57. I would call that the Gretsch 6120 Chet Atkins Bewilderer because it has no less than 7 three-way switches on it, and so this is a guitar that it's not so much easy to get lost on as virtually impossible to find your way on.
Well, Chet was a producer, wasn't he? So he was used to fiddling around with those.
But the other thing is that Gretsch famously changed the configuration of their guitars almost every production run. So, so one of them would have had 5 switches, another one 4 knobs, another one 7. I've never seen this many switches on I mean, not even on a white Falcon, I don't think I've seen this many switches.
Well, it's just one more, isn't it? It's just one more.
It goes to one
Yeah.
more, but God knows what they do.
But anyway,
You've had
what-
them bypassed.
Yeah, what happened was I took it to Bill and said I can't really play this because I'm always turning it off. And he said he hadn't seen any wiring like this, so he made a pattern of I think the schematic's probably inside there somewhere, and he turned it into the regular wiring that's on the Brian Setzer Classic.
Right.
So you get that kind of
But
sound.
it's a great playing guitar.
It's a great playing guitar. I mean, essentially, these are kind of cowboy jazz guitars.
Yeah.
My 16th note.
As cowboy jazz goes, that sounded quite 10 years after.
Well, the neck is absolutely
Coming home.
incredible.
Lovely, isn't it?
The neck is just to die for. Just the right shape. Do you find that?
Yeah, I really like it. And also, it's got one massive advantage over every other guitar, and that is it smells the best of any guitar, especially in the case. The case is really smelly.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So what do you have here, Bob?
Well, we're doing Gretches. This is a bit odd. I don't know how many there are of these around. This is Gretsch 12-string.
Sounds great. Sounds absolutely great.
Yeah, so it's great. Not so many switches.
Merciful.
And there's a string missing from the top, but it wasn't like that when I bought it. So yeah, nice guitar, and it makes a change from the kind of more usual Rickenbacker 12-string sound. Actually, what's quite nice is I've done quite a lot of recording with this, just playing acoustic and recording.
It's got a big sound, hasn't it?
Yeah. So if you play that against maybe an electric Ricky or something and put the two together, it's a really nice sound.
Right, okay. Now, there's something interesting going on with the pickups here. These are Filtertron pickups again, but they've got these very strange silver rails running across the top of them. I've never seen this. The Gretsch fans out there will probably jump to tell me exactly what they're about. We might try and get a close-up of these. I've never seen this on Gretsch pickups.
Yeah.
This being an electric 12-string, so the fashion for 12 strings, jangle, started in about, what, 63, 64.
Yeah.
And, you know, by 64, everybody, Rickenbacker, Gibson,
Fender.
Gretsch, Fender, everybody's making an electric 12-string. So I guess this is a mid-60s guitar?
I can't remember. I would imagine so, yeah.
And it's interesting again because it's got a metal floating bridge on it, so just like a jazz guitar, but made of metal. These are things you tend to see most commonly with Bigsby's, but this looks native to this guitar, and with the Gretsch tailpiece and everything. So it's a really, again, typical Gretsch. They change the configuration of their guitars every month. Sounds fantastic. And so, to complete the set, I've got a guitar very similar to the one that I own, which you've seen in previous videos. This is a Gretsch Duo Jet from about 1956. So you can tell it's 56 because the logo has gone to the square logo from the windy toothpaste one. The block markers are still on the guitar. The block markers are quite big. It's got a pair of Diamond, what do we call these? Dynasonic pickups. Now this one, mine's a hardtail, this has a Bigsby, and by the way, the bridge that I was mentioning, the metal footed bridge, accompanies the Bigsby on this guitar. And just to say, I mean, it feels very similar to mine, it feels very well made. It has it's not heavy, but it has a certain weight and thickness about it. It's a very nice guitar. It's actually sounding quite mellow. I'm not supposed. I don't think this guitar was designed to be made to play like that. But these guitars are actually quite good for sort of alty blues type stuff, and they sit somewhere between a Fender and a Gibson for me. A very flexible guitar. I love playing it.
George Harrison's first big guitar, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So all the early Beatles stuff was done on something like that.
On a Duo Jet, absolutely.
Didn't Cliff Gallup play one of those? Didn't he? But, or it might have been the Silver Jet.
I think
they made a number of different.
I think they were all the same guitar. They made it in black. They made it in silver colour, silver drum finish, red, which is a Rock Jet. And I saw one the other day. I've never seen this before. This was a double cut, so later from 1961, and it was a Chet Atkins. So it had all the cowboy tooling and on the case, and it was a kind of caramel. It wasn't as orange as that, but it was a kind of caramel colour. And I've never seen a Chet Atkins Duo Jet, single or double cut before. They're pretty unusual, but they made them in multiple finishes. Also, there are reportedly on both the single and double cuts, there are holy grail guitars, because the drums were offered in a number of finishes. So there was turquoise, there was gold, there was red sparkle, emerald sparkle, champagne sparkle, which is like silver but sort of flecked all the colours and looks a bit beigey. And there are rumours that these guitars exist in all those finishes. But I mean, they may just be rumours. You know, for example, at the moment there's a shop in London that's got a gold Firebird 5 from 1964 there, and the price is stratospheric. It's fantastic. But actually that's fair because nobody can find another one anywhere. So if it's that rare, then okay, it may not be for every player out there. For collectors, woof, you know? Or like that green Firebird one that keeps on turning up in all the guitar magazines. I mean, no one's ever seen another one. So what's it worth? What one man is prepared to pay for it, period.
One more comment on that guitar is that they made a lot of them with a fixed Bigsby,
Yes.
which is one to avoid. Well, you'll get it cheaper if you buy it, because I think that's what Cliff Gallup had. It played in Gene Vincent's band, and Jeff Beck did an album of covers of Cliff Gallup's stuff, which is fantastic, called Crazy Legs. So it's really worth checking that out. Wonderful non-Jeff Beck type player. But I think he did that with a fixed Bigsby. So you kind of, your arm is, you can't move yourself around much because it's fixed in. You keep banging.
You're right. It's literally like imagine fixing that in position there, and it's there all the time. The one thing about these fixed Bigsbys is great though, is that the movement they give to the vibrato. That movement is, with a fixed Bigsby, the connection you have between your hand and the string tension is much stronger, and they do feel fantastic to do vibrato on. But the problem is you've got this damned arm here all the time when you don't want it as well as when you do want it. Hey, but there you are. So those are three really tasty 60s, well 50s and 60s Gretches. Nice to see these kind of guitars again. You know, like we did in the last video with Guilds. You don't see these guitars out in company that much. So
Well, not good company.
Not good company like us. Hey. So let's cap this off with one last flush of amazing guitars.
Because I think this is probably the oldest guitar from the three. This is the incredible D'Angelico New York, made in New York, but this is a Style from the mid Style A. Yeah, it's not a national, is it? It's a Style A from the mid 40s, and it's just the holy grail of the jazz archtop guitar, isn't it? You know, and the D'Angelico obviously had an apprentice called D'Acquisto. He sort of, you know, and he unfortunately they both passed away, but
at the same age.
Yeah,
both in their early 50s.
Yeah,
but the design sort of continues, and this was you know, this was a guitar. You know, Grant Green had one, and George Benson.
Love Grant Green.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and a lot of the guitar players, Jim Hall. Although I think he had a D'Acquisto. But a lot of the New York jazz guys had one of these. This was, you know, when you were professional, this was a guitar that you needed to have in order to have that really great jazz guitar tone. The beautiful neck, nice chunky neck, isn't it? You know, with a sort of very interesting shape, but very easy to play those kind of fast pop lines. And just an effortless guitar. Notice that you have round wounds, which are really nice on this, I think.
Yeah, you've got to do it properly, and that's what it needs. It's D'Angelico was a very, very distantly related. In other words, it was a long time related to the Stradivari family of Italy, you know, making Stradivarius violins. And it's obviously something in the blood or the soul or whatever.
Yeah.
This was his cleanest, cheapest, the Style A. He only ever made 1,400 guitars, and apparently when he finished carving the top of each guitar, he knew so well what the shape of the curve was on the top, that he didn't need to refer back to anything else to carve the bottom of the bridge, because he just knew it. He understood it. He understood the guitar, and he just would carve that, and it would fit perfectly on the top. It's got a diamond.
The rhythm tube, is it a rhythm tube?
It comes with a very kind of cumbersome three-piece thing, volume thing that you kind of bung the lead through into the body of the guitar, and it's not very satisfactory. So I had that changed, and just a little thumb wheel put under there. But I've got the other bit. I haven't thrown it away. But it's really nice. I bought it from a guitar shop on Staten Island, unseen, and I just, as soon as it came up, I just thought that was the one.
Yeah.
And when it arrived, it was.
And it is a Stradivarius of the guitar world, isn't it? This is the most sort of regal guitar that you could possibly own.
Yeah, it's like if you've ever been on a dude ranch or something, and you sit on a horse, and the horse turns around and says, "Just don't mess around, sonny. I'll get you to the top and back down again, but just don't try and kick me or spur me or or shake the reins or anything. And it's a bit like that with this guitar. Just the neck turns around and says, like, you hang on. I mean, look, Ramon couldn't have done those licks before he sat down without a guitar. He couldn't do it.
And now,
see what I mean? So anyway, you had your burst on that, and go back to playing 12 bars and.
So moving onwards, now what have we got? We've got here a guitar with the most knobs of any guitar today.
Well, other than the one that...
the Gretsch had more switches.
It's a switchmaster from, I think it's 59. I should have checked these dates. It's 56, between 56 and 59.
It's going to be 50 years.
So it's the first time somebody had an idea that you had all these pickups, all three pickups, and well, that's good, but you had all these knobs, and it was like impossible. So somebody came up with this great big thing, which looks like a Telecaster switch.
But bigger.
Yeah, yeah. It was designed really to be an early rock and roll guitar. I think. I think the Chuck Berry one, if I'm right, is a thin line version of this. Yeah.
and I think the Galore one, was that a short scale? Did he have, was that a short scale like the Birdland?
No, it lasted for years. So nice blonde, plays well, all original.
Lots of figuring in the maple. On the back, interesting, I can see it's got not one but two stingers. So it's got a stinger on the headstock, which is not uncommon on these higher end guitars. Also got a stinger on the heel, which is much less common. And some very nice maple figuring going on. Now these are guitars, with this kind of guitar, you know, I'm holding an equivalent guitar, probably same period, so let's think. They've got humbuckers, so they're definitely after 58. And they've got two pneumatics, so they're definitely, well, that one has, this doesn't. That's after 57, so, and the knobs are certainly, now this is later, well these are 60 knobs. So, and the pickups are clean, so this might be a couple of years later, it might be early 60. This is ridiculous amount of flame in the wood, this Super 400. Get this strand out of the way. It's got a lot of flame going on in the maple there, if I just move it around a bit. Again, it's got a black stinger, complete with mother of pearl inlay on the back of the headstock. Fancy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5-piece, 5-piece neck, laminated walnut through maple. These guitars, they actually evolved quite a lot over their time, Super 400s. The first ones came out in about 1928 or 30, and they were really quite, they sounded more like that D'Angelico. They sounded softer, they sounded gentler. And Gibson evolved these over the period because more and more of the big band jazz guitarists were using them. They used these big bodies to project the sound, the arcstocks to project the sound, but they braced them heavier and heavier so the guys could really... They really used to hit their guitars.
Freddie Green.
Yeah.
Really, really hard.
Yeah.
And so these guitars gradually, their feel and their sound got harder across the late 30s and early 40s, and then pretty much stayed. But the only other thing to say about these is that there was a short period when this, which is called a Venetian cutaway, went into a sharp cutaway, a Florentine cutaway, for about 2 years.
Not so nice. I never liked it.
But another of our good friends, mutual friend, whose collection we've featured, he's particularly mad about those Florentine cutaway 400s, and he's owned a lot. And when I say a lot, I don't mean a handful. I mean buckets full. Anyway, it's again, some of these guitars I find quite dead. This one's very lively, nicely balanced.
Yeah, it's a lovely guitar. You'll notice it hasn't got a pick guard on it.
True.
And the reason is, that they're relatively rare in that condition, is that the pick guard was covered in something or other. It wasn't tortoiseshell, whatever it was made of.
Early celluloid.
And it gives off this noxious gas. And if you leave them in the case, you come back to find all the strings have rotted away,
And
all the metalwork, all the gold stuff's gone.
Yeah.
So, on Bill's advice, I took it off.
You still got it though?
Yeah, it's in the case.
Right.
I think the case has disappeared now as well.
So this is quite a departure for us. We haven't featured too many jazz guitars so far. We've got 3 pretty jazzy guitars here, albeit a jazz guitar, and a early rock and roll coming out of jazz guitar. But 3 better examples, you know, these big wide-bodied things you couldn't hope to get in one place at once. Just fantastic.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's beautiful. This is, for me, it's just playing a D'Angelico is really would be the highlight of any sort of jazz guitarist, you know, career. I think.
Yeah.
You said it was like cooking.
Well, and your cooking. Well, the breakfast, the dulce de leche breakfast. But yeah, I mean, you know, if you can't, it's kind of like a grown-up guitar, and therefore, you know, you really need to play the beautiful chords and the beautiful melodies and. Parisian walkways, and what's that still?
It didn't sound much like it.
Didn't sound much like it.
But you know, it's just like, you know, it's a grown-up guitar, and everybody who plays guitar will one day eventually have one of these. You know, a Telecaster and one of these. I think that's it.
Or something like the Look of Love or something, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not the Look of Love? No, okay.
So there you go. So we're going to finish.
We're going to finish with one more really unusual, rare instrument. Finishing up, because we've really saturated you with guitars today of all different kinds, fantastic guitars. This one we thought we'd finish with. It's got a bit of a crunchy input jack. So I'm just going to, yeah. So, right. It's just a Rickenbacker 12 string, you think? Well, yes it is and it isn't. It's got several things that are quite important about it. It's about 1967, right? 67, yeah. Which is pretty much the heyday for Rickenbacker 12 strings. They were made really well in those days. The necks on these things are fantastic. This has got 2 things going on about it that make it very special. The first thing is it's not a 360 12, which is the standard semi-acoustic one like the black one I have. It's a 366. It has this thing called a comb converter. And what this thing does is it's got a series of 6 hooks that slide across under the strings and then lift up and pick up and pull away and mute all the octave strings. So it converts the guitar from a 12 string to a 6 string.
Actually it doesn't, it doesn't at all. What it does is convert this guitar from a 12 string into an O string.
Yes.
Because it breaks every string that you hit, which is why it didn't last, you see. But you can see this here. Look.
It's a wonderful piece of mid-60s American engineering design.
You could do your hair, do your quiff with it, it's perfect, you see. But in other respects, it's not terribly useful. So I don't think people use them really and take them off. But anyway, it's on here and it doesn't make any, it doesn't mess it around.
It doesn't get in the way.
It doesn't get in the way because it's here. I'd never worry about it.
Second thing is obviously the Rickenbackers, unlike the Gretsch we've just seen, Rickenbacker reversed their stringing on the octave strings, so the second, third, fourth, and fifth string. Rickenbacker 12 strings have the low note above on top, whereas most 12 strings have the low note at the bottom. Now I've actually reversed the stringing on mine because I prefer the conventional 12 string stringing, but this is strung correctly for a Rickenbacker, which is bass note nearest the sky, treble note nearest the floor. So that's that. But the most significant thing about this guitar is the colour. So this is what's known as burgundy glow. So Rickenbacker called their sunburst, they called it, what do they call it? Sunburst? For goodness sake, I forgot.
Fire glow?
Fire glow, of course, fire glow. Black they called jet glow, and so on. They've got various other glows, but this is burgundy glow, and it's a non-transparent burgundy colour. It's very, very rare. Occasionally a burgundy glow Rickenbacker from this period will show up, but I wouldn't imagine there are very many 360 12s or 366 12s at all. This is a very unusual guitar. So, really great. Fantastic. I notice that you often go to the middle position, all the pickups on. The guitar has a stereo output, so you can put it into 2 amps. It sounds madly good through 2 amps. These are my favourite, the Iconic 12 string. This is a really great example. It's in very good condition too. So we thought we'd wrap up with that. We hope you've enjoyed today's video. It's likely to be slightly fractured. It's going to be quite long because there's so many guitars. There's so much great stuff here. But you know, obviously thanks to Ramon, who's been let out of the doghouse, but mainly I'm going to let the last word to our host here, Bob.
Yeah, thanks, and it's been a great pleasure, up to a point, to be with these guys.
So
I hope you enjoyed it.
It's goodbye from Bob.
Yeah.
It's goodbye from Bob, and that's too long, so we're going to call you Bob.
Bob and Bob.
Cheerio, until next time. Bye.